The gunshot echoed through the Montana wilderness like thunder, sending a flock of crows scattering into the darkening sky. Rylan Blackwood lowered his rifle, squinting against the biting December wind as he watched the deer collapse 100 yards away. Meet for the winter, another day of survival in the unforgiving territory of 1876. Little did he know that this ordinary hunting expedition would forever alter the course of his solitary existence. As twilight descended and the temperature plummeted, Rylan slung the field-dressed deer across his horse's back. Snow had begun to fall, gentle at first, but growing heavier by the minute. The weather had turned faster than he'd anticipated. His small ranch lay 5 miles south, and with visibility deteriorating rapidly, he knew he needed to find shelter soon. Providence came in the form of the old Thornfield property, abandoned since its owners had fled during the last Blackfoot raid 2 summers ago. The dilapidated barn loomed ahead through the swirling snow, a dark silhouette against the white landscape. Rylan guided his horse toward it, the promise of temporary refuge a welcome thought as the cold seeped through his buckskin jacket. He was securing his horse inside the barn when he heard a soft whimpering that could have been mistaken for the wind. But Rylan's years in the wilderness had sharpened his senses. That sound was human. Following the noise, he rounded the corner of the barn, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt revolver at his hip. What he found stopped him cold. A woman huddled against the weathered boards, her body convulsing with violent shivers. Her dress, once fine by the look of the fabric, was torn and muddied. Dark hair tumbled in frozen tendrils around a face pale as the snow surrounding her. "Madam." Rylan approached cautiously. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, startling green, like spring leaves, and focused on him with terror. "Don't," she whispered through blue-tinged lips. "Please don't hurt me." Rylan immediately shrugged off his heavy coat, crouching beside her. "I ain't going to hurt you. You'll freeze to death out here." Without hesitation, he wrapped the coat around her trembling shoulders. She was light, too light, as he gathered her into his arms. Her head lolled against his chest, consciousness slipping away. "Stay with me," he urged, carrying her into the barn where his horse nickered softly. "What's your name?" "Olivia," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Olivia Marshall." The interior of the barn offered little warmth, but it blocked the howling wind. Rylan carefully set Olivia down on a pile of old hay, then hastily gathered what dry wood he could find. Within minutes, he had a small fire crackling in a cleared dirt patch. He assessed her condition in the flickering light. Frostbite hadn't set in yet, but her hands and face were dangerously cold. Bruises marred her wrists, and a dried cut slashed across her cheekbone. Someone had done this to her, left her to die in the Montana winter. "Miss Marshall," he said, his voice gentler than he usually allowed it to be. "I need to get you warmed up. Can you tell me how you came to be here?" Olivia's eyes opened again, clearer now as the fire's warmth began to reach her. "They took everything," she whispered. "The stagecoach. They killed the driver. I ran so far." Her words dissolved into tears, and Rylan didn't press further. Road bandits were common enough in these parts. That she had escaped at all was a miracle. "You're safe now," he said, though he knew such promises held little weight in this unforgiving land. "I'm Rylan Blackwood. My ranch is a few hours' ride from here, but we'll have to wait out the storm." He offered her a sip from his canteen, then set about preparing a more substantial meal. The deer he'd shot would provide fresh meat, and he always carried coffee and hardtack in his saddlebags. "Why are you helping me?" Olivia asked as he worked, suspicion threading through her exhaustion. Rylan paused, knife in hand. It was a fair question in a territory where kindness often came with hidden costs. "Out here, we help when we can," he said simply. "Winter's no time for anyone to be alone." As the night deepened and the storm raged outside, Rylan learned fragments of Olivia's story. She'd been traveling from Boston to stay with her uncle in Helena after the death of her parents. Everything she owned had been in that stagecoach money, clothes, letters of introduction. All gone now. "My uncle doesn't even know I'm coming," she admitted, color slowly returning to her cheeks. "It was to be a surprise. I haven't seen him since I was a child." Rylan nodded, adding another stick to the fire. "Once the storm passes, I can take you to Helena. It's a 3-day ride, but my horse is strong." Olivia studied him, wariness still evident in her posture. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." "I know you need help," he replied, his weathered face illuminated by the dancing flames. "And I've got nowhere pressing to be." It wasn't the whole truth. His small ranch needed constant attention, and a week away could mean livestock lost or buildings damaged. But something about this woman, her determination to survive, perhaps had stirred something in him that had lain dormant since the war. They slept in shifts that night, though Rylan barely closed his eyes. Each time Olivia drifted off, nightmares seemed to claim her, and she would wake with a start, eyes wild with remembered fear. By morning, the storm had subsided, leaving the world transformed into a glistening white expanse. Rylan stepped outside to assess their situation, the cold air searing his lungs. "It's bad," he told Olivia when he returned, shaking snow from his hat. "Drifts higher than a man in some places. We'll need to stay put another day at least." Olivia nodded, resignation in her eyes. She had folded his coat and offered it back to him, now wearing a rough blanket from his saddlebag around her shoulders. "Keep it," he said, nodding at the coat. "I've got layers enough." That second day brought a tentative trust between them. Rylan showed her how to properly clean the deer meat and set it to smoke over the fire. Olivia, in turn, revealed an unexpected knowledge of medicinal plants, identifying several dried specimens in Rylan's saddlebag that could be brewed into a healing tea for his persistent cough. "My mother was interested in botanical medicine," she explained, carefully measuring the herbs into his tin cup. She believed women should be self-sufficient in more ways than society deemed appropriate. Rylan smiled, a rare expression that transformed his stern face. "Sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Olivia said softly, her eyes distant with memory. "Too wise for Boston society. They never forgave her for marrying my father, a mere professor without fortune or connections." By nightfall, they had established a comfortable rhythm. Rylan told stories of his time scouting for the Union Army, carefully omitting the worst horrors of war. Olivia spoke of Boston, of concert halls and libraries that Rylan could scarcely imagine. "What brought you west?" she asked as they shared the last of his coffee. "You don't seem the typical frontier settler." Rylan stared into the fire, considering his answer. After the war, the East felt confined. Too many ghosts walking those streets. Out here, a man can breathe, can start again. "And have you?" "Started again." "I'm still breathing," he replied, a hint of wry humor in his voice. "Reckon that counts for something." The following morning broke clear and cold. The snow had settled enough for travel, though the going would be slow. As Rylan saddled his horse, Olivia stood nearby, uncertainty written across her features. "It occurs to me," she said hesitantly, "that I have no way to repay you for this journey to Helena." "I have nothing." Rylan secured the last strap before turning to her. "I'm not looking for payment, Miss Marshall." "Olivia," she corrected gently. "After sharing a barn for 2 nights, I think formalities seem rather unnecessary." A smile tugged at his lips. "Olivia, then." The journey to Helena was arduous. They rode double on Rylan's horse, stopping frequently to let the animal rest in the deep snow. At night, they made camp in whatever shelter they could find, once in an abandoned mining shack, once beneath an overhanging rock formation that blocked the worst of the wind. During those long hours of riding, Olivia's body pressed against his back, her arms around his waist for balance. Rylan found himself increasingly aware of her in ways that went beyond duty or compassion. The scent of her hair, somehow still carrying a trace of lavender despite her ordeal. The strength in her slender hands as she helped set up camp. The intelligence in her questions about the land and its people. On the third afternoon, they crested a hill to see Helena spread before them in the valley below. The mining town had grown substantially since Rylan's last visit, with new buildings dotting the landscape and smoke rising from dozens of chimneys. "We'll find your uncle before nightfall," he promised, feeling an unexpected reluctance to complete their journey. Olivia didn't immediately respond. When he glanced back, her expression was troubled. "What is it?" "I'm afraid," she admitted. "What if he doesn't want me? What if the bandits were a sign that I shouldn't have come at all?" Rylan considered this. "In my experience, signs don't work that way. Good or bad, things just happen. It's what we do after that matters." They rode into Helena as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. The town was bustling despite the cold miners coming off shifts, merchants closing shops, saloon doors swinging open to release bursts of raucous laughter and piano music. Olivia directed them to a modest house on the eastern edge of town. As they approached, Rylan felt her tense against him. Would you come in with me?" she asked, her voice small. "Just until I'm certain of my welcome?" How could he refuse? Rylan helped her down from the horse, noting how she straightened her borrowed clothes and attempted to smooth her wind-tangled hair. An older man answered their knock, tall and lean, with a scholarly stoop to his shoulders and spectacles perched on his nose. His eyes widened as he took in the woman before him. "Olivia? Margaret's daughter?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "Uncle Frederick," Olivia breathed, relief washing over her face. "Yes, it's me." What followed was a flurry of exclamations and explanations. Frederick Marshall ushered them inside to a small but comfortable home lined with bookshelves. He was, Rylan learned, the town's schoolteacher and something of a local historian. When Olivia recounted her ordeal, her uncle's face darkened with anger and concern. "My dear girl, to think what might have happened if this gentleman hadn't found you." He turned to Rylan with sincere gratitude. "Mr. Blackwood, I am forever in your debt." Rylan shifted uncomfortably under the older man's regard. "Anyone would have done the same." "I think we both know that isn't true," Frederick replied gravely. "Please, you must stay for dinner at least. And of course, you'll need lodging for the night." The invitation was genuine, but Rylan found himself reluctant to impose further. "There's an inn near the livery. I'll be fine there." "Nonsense," Frederick insisted. "I have a spare room. It's the least I can offer after what you've done for my niece." Rylan glanced at Olivia, whose eyes held a silent plea. "All right," he conceded. "Thank you." Dinner was the finest meal Rylan had eaten in months: roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread. Frederick proved to be an engaging host, his knowledge of the territory's history impressive. But it was Olivia who captivated Rylan's attention. In the warmth and safety of her uncle's home, she blossomed, her intelligence and wit emerging from behind the trauma of recent days. Later, as Frederick showed Rylan to the spare room, the older man paused in the hallway. "You saved her life," he said quietly. "But more than that, you treated her with dignity when she was at her most vulnerable. That speaks to your character, Mr. Blackwood." Rylan had no response to this unexpected assessment. He merely nodded and bid Frederick good night. Sleep eluded him. The comfort of a real bed felt strange after so many nights under the stars or on hard ground. His thoughts kept returning to Olivia. She was safe now, her future secured by her uncle's evident affection. His role in her story was complete. So why did that realization leave him feeling hollow? Morning brought clarity and the practicalities of departure. Rylan rose early, intending to leave before the household awakened, but found Olivia already in the kitchen, preparing coffee. "You are going to leave without saying goodbye," she said, Not a question, but a statement of fact. Rylan adjusted his hat, a nervous gesture he rarely indulged. Thought it might be easier. Easier for whom? Olivia placed a steaming cup before him. Sit. Drink this first, at least. He complied, watching as she moved about the kitchen with growing confidence. The frightened woman by the barn seemed a distant memory. Your uncle seems like a good man, he offered. He is. I'm fortunate. She sat across from him, cradling her own cup. He's already spoken of finding me a position at the school. Apparently, they're in need of another teacher. You'll be good at that. Olivia studied him over the rim of her cup. And what will you do now, Rylan Blackwood? Return to your solitary ranch. The question carried no judgment, only genuine curiosity, yet it struck a chord within him. What was he returning to? Empty rooms and endless chores, the company of livestock and occasional traders passing through. That's the plan, he replied, his voice gruffer than intended. Well. She reached across the table, her hand coming to rest lightly on his. Know that you'll always have friends in Helena, should you ever tire of solitude. The warmth of her touch lingered long after Rylan had mounted his horse and left the town behind. The journey home seemed longer somehow, the landscape emptier despite being unchanged from days before. Winter settled into its rhythm. Rylan tended his small herd of cattle, repaired fences broken by snowdrifts, and tried not to think about green eyes and a voice that spoke of concert halls and botanical medicine. He failed miserably at the latter. January passed into February. One particularly bitter evening, as Rylan sat before his fire darning a worn sock, a knock came at his door. Visitors were rare, especially in winter, and he approached with caution, revolver in hand. Who's there? He called. A very cold schoolteacher, came the reply, a feminine voice that sent his heart racing. Who would appreciate being let in before she freezes, like she nearly did 2 months ago? Rylan flung open the door to find Olivia standing on his porch, bundled in a proper winter coat and wrapped in scarves. A rented horse stood patiently behind her. What in God's name are you doing here? He demanded, even as he pulled her inside. Olivia unwound her scarf, her cheeks flushed with cold and something else, determination, perhaps. I came to return your coat, she said, holding out the buckskin jacket he'd wrapped around her that fateful night. And to ask why you haven't come to town once since you left. Rylan took the coat automatically, his mind struggling to make sense of her presence. It's a 3-day ride in good weather. Yes, I'm acutely aware of that fact right now, she replied dryly. You didn't answer my question. He turned away, busying himself with stoking the fire. Been busy with the ranch. Rylan. The sound of his name on her lips made him still. My uncle says you haven't even come in for supplies. You've been avoiding Helena. Avoiding me. When he faced her again, she had moved closer, her expression a mixture of confusion and hurt. Have I misunderstood? She asked softly. I thought there was something between us, something worth exploring. The words he'd forbidden himself to hope for hung in the air between them. Rylan ran a hand through his hair, searching for the right response. You deserve better than a broken-down former soldier with nothing to his name but a struggling ranch, he said finally. You're educated, cultured. You belong in town with people who can appreciate those things. Olivia's eyes flashed with sudden anger. Don't you dare tell me what I deserve or where I belong. I've had quite enough of men making those decisions for me. She closed the distance between them, stopping just short of touching him. I've spent my whole life trying to fit where others thought I should. The proper Boston lady. The obedient daughter. When those bandits took everything from me and left me to die, do you know what I thought about in those hours before you found me? Rylan shook his head, transfixed by the passion in her voice. I thought about all the things I'd never done because I was too afraid of disappointing others. All the adventures I'd never have. Her voice softened. And then you came, and for the first time, I felt truly seen. Not as someone to be protected or molded, but as a person of value, just as I am. She reached up, her hand coming to rest against his cheek. So don't tell me what I deserve. Ask me what I want. The fire crackled in the silence that followed, its light playing across her features. Rylan covered her hand with his own, turning his face slightly to press a kiss to her palm. What do you want, Olivia Marshall? Her smile was radiant. To see if what began in that barn might grow into something more. To discover if the connection I felt with you is real or merely a product of our extraordinary circumstances. And if it was real, he asked, hardly daring to breathe. Then we'll figure out the rest together, she replied simply. That night, they talked until the fire burned low. Olivia spoke of her position at the school, of the children she was coming to care for, of her uncle's encouragement of her independence. Rylan shared more of his past than he ever had with another soul the family lost to typhoid before the war, the nightmares that still sometimes woke him, the dream of making his ranch not just a place of survival, but a true home. When exhaustion finally claimed them, Rylan insisted Olivia take his bed while he slept on a pallet before the fire. It was the proper thing to do, though propriety seemed a strange concern given their previous time alone together. The morning brought new snow and a comfortable domesticity that surprised them both. They worked side by side preparing breakfast, moving around each other as if they'd done so for years rather than hours. I can only stay until tomorrow, Olivia said as they ate. Uncle Frederick knows where I've gone. He helped me plan the journey, in fact, but I'm expected back at the school on Monday. Rylan nodded, already dreading her departure even as he marveled at her presence. It's not safe for you to travel alone. I'll take you back. Then you'll have to make the journey twice, she pointed out. Once to take me to Helena, and again to return here. Yes. Olivia studied him over her coffee cup, a habit he was coming to recognize. And after that, will you disappear again for months? The question hung between them, and Rylan knew his answer would shape whatever future they might have. No, he said finally. If you want me to come to town, I will. Her smile was worth every mile he would have to ride. They spent the day together, Rylan showing her the ranch, the small barn with its 4 milk cows and his faithful horse, the chicken coop, the vegetable garden now dormant under snow, the creek that provided fresh water year-round. It wasn't much compared to Boston or even Helena, but Olivia's interest seemed genuine. You've built something meaningful here, she said as they stood on the porch, surveying the property. A place that sustains life. That's no small accomplishment. Her words warmed him more than he could express. That evening, as they again sat before the fire, the conversation turned to more personal matters. Have you ever been married? Olivia asked, her fingers busy with some mending she'd insisted on doing after noticing the state of his shirts. Rylan shook his head. There was a girl, before the war. We had plans. But she married someone else while I was fighting. Can't blame her, no guarantee I'd come back. I'm sorry. He shrugged. It was a long time ago. What about you? No suitors in Boston. Olivia's hands stilled. There was one. A banker my father approved of. He wasn't who I thought he was. Her voice held a shadow that made Rylan want to find this unnamed man and introduce him to frontier justice. After I broke our engagement, my reputation suffered. It was part of why I decided to come west after my parents died. Rylan reached over and covered her hand with his. His loss. Her smile returned, and with it a mischievous glint in her eye. Indeed. Though I admit, when I imagined a fresh start in the West, being abandoned in a snowstorm and rescued by a taciturn cowboy wasn't precisely what I had in mind. Life's full of surprises, Rylan replied, returning her smile with one of his own. The next morning dawned clear but cold. They set out early, again riding double on Rylan's sturdy horse. This time, however, the journey felt different. There was an ease between them, a comfort in shared silence and casual conversation alike. They made better time than on their previous journey, arriving in Helena as dusk fell on the second day. Frederick welcomed them both warmly, insisting Rylan stay for dinner and overnight once again. "I've heard much about your ranch from Olivia," Frederick said as they enjoyed after-dinner coffee. "It sounds like you've carved out a respectable homestead." "It's modest," Rylan replied, "but it's mine. Free and clear." Frederick nodded approvingly. A man who owns his land outright is a rare thing these days. "I take it you plan to expand eventually?" The question caught Rylan off guard. He'd been so focused on survival that long-term planning seemed a luxury. "I suppose I should. More cattle would mean more income." "Indeed. And perhaps a larger house at some point." Frederick's gaze slid meaningfully to his niece. "Uncle," Olivia protested, color rising in her cheeks. Frederick raised his hands in mock surrender. "Merely thinking of the future, my dear. As educators, that's what we're trained to do." Later, as Rylan prepared for bed in the guest room, a soft knock came at his door. Olivia stood in the hallway, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, "for coming back with me, for not disappearing." "I keep my promises," he replied simply. She studied him in the dim light. "When will you return to your ranch?" "Tomorrow. Got animals to tend to." Olivia nodded, disappointment flashing briefly across her face despite her understanding. Will you write to me?" "I know it's not easy getting mail out your way, but perhaps when you come to town for supplies." Rylan reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture of surprising tenderness. "I'll write, and I'll come to town in 2 weeks. Sooner if the weather holds." Her smile was worth every hardship he would face on the journey home. True to his word, Rylan returned to Helena 2 weeks later. He came bearing gifts: a carved wooden box for Olivia and a rare book on Montana history he'd traded with a passing peddler for Frederick. The joy on Olivia's face when she saw him waiting outside the schoolhouse made his heart skip. That visit established a pattern that carried them through the remaining winter months and into spring. Every 2 weeks, Rylan would ride into Helena, staying for a day or two before returning to his ranch. Sometimes Frederick would conveniently find reasons to be absent, allowing Rylan and Olivia privacy for walks through town or quiet conversations by the fire. Their relationship blossomed slowly, with a care that reflected their mutual respect and the value they placed on what was growing between them. Their first kiss came on a chilly March evening as Rylan prepared to depart for his ranch. It was gentle and brief, but it sealed an unspoken promise between them. April brought heavy rains and swollen creeks that made travel treacherous. For nearly a month, Rylan couldn't make the journey to Helena. He wrote letters instead, paying a passing trader handsomely to deliver them. His penmanship was rough, his words sometimes awkward, but he poured his growing feelings onto those pages with honest sincerity. When the roads finally cleared in May, he rode into Helena with a determination that surprised even himself. He found Olivia at the school, helping children plant a small garden in the yard. "Rylan," she cried upon seeing him, heedless of the curious stares from her pupils. She rushed to him, stopping just short of an embrace that would have scandalized the town. "We were so worried." "The creeks, I'm fine," he assured her, drinking in the sight of her. The sun had brought out freckles across her nose, and her hands bore the marks of honest work. She had never looked more beautiful to him. "Is your uncle at home? I need to speak with him." Confusion crossed her face. "Yes, I believe so." "Is something wrong?" "No," Rylan said, a rare smile spreading across his features. "For once, everything's exactly right." He found Frederick in his study, surrounded by books and papers. The older man welcomed him warmly. "Rylan, we'd begun to worry. The spring floods can be treacherous." "Had a few close calls," Rylan admitted, "but I made it through." "Sir," I've come to ask your permission for something important. Frederick set aside his papers, giving Rylan his full attention. I believe I can guess what it might be. Please sit down. Rylan remained standing, hat in hand. I'd like your blessing to ask for Olivia's hand in marriage. I know I'm not the sort of man her parents might have chosen for her. I'm not educated or wealthy. But I love her, sir. More than I thought possible. Frederick studied him thoughtfully. Do you know why I encouraged Olivia to seek you out after you left her here? Why I helped her plan that journey to your ranch? Rylan shook his head. Because in the few hours I observed you together, I saw something rare. You look at her as an equal, not as a possession or a decoration or a means to an end. You value her mind as much as her beauty. Frederick rose, coming to stand before Rylan. Her parents were good people who wanted the best for their daughter, but they were constrained by the society they lived in. Out here, we have the freedom to choose based on character rather than circumstance. He extended his hand. You have my blessing, Rylan. Though I suspect Olivia would marry you with or without it. She's quite determined when she sets her mind to something. Rylan laughed, relief washing through him as he shook Frederick's hand. I've noticed that. The proposal came that evening, as they walked along the creek that ran behind Frederick's house. Rylan had rehearsed eloquent words, but when the moment came, simple truth seemed best. I love you, he said, taking her hands in his. I never expected to find someone like you, especially not shivering beside an abandoned barn in a snowstorm. But now that I have, I can't imagine life without you. Will you marry me, Olivia? Will you build a life with me? Tears welled in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. The kiss that followed sealed their future tender at first, then deepening with a promise of all they would share. They married in June, a small ceremony in Frederick's garden with the schoolchildren in attendance and a circuit-riding preacher officiating. Olivia wore a simple dress of pale blue, flowers in her hair instead of a veil. Rylan had purchased a new shirt and vest for the occasion, and even trimmed his beard. They spoke their vows beneath an arch of early summer roses, their voices clear and certain. The journey to the ranch, their home, now was different from those earlier trips. They rode side by side, Olivia on a mare that had been Frederick's wedding gift to them. The future stretched before them like the Montana landscape, vast and challenging, but full of beauty and possibility. That first night as husband and wife brought nervous laughter and tender discoveries, the culmination of months of growing love and trust. As they lay together in the widened bed Rylan had built in anticipation of their marriage, Olivia traced the scars on his chest, souvenirs of war and hard living. Do you think we're mad? She asked softly. A Boston schoolmistress and a frontier rancher? Rylan caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. If this is madness, I never want sanity again. Summer flowed into their first autumn together. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts. Olivia's knowledge of plants expanded their garden, and her careful accounting helped them save enough to purchase 10 additional cattle. Rylan added a proper sitting room to the cabin, with bookshelves for the volumes Frederick regularly sent. Their nearest neighbors, the Hendersons, lived 5 miles away, but distance did not prevent friendship from forming. Sarah Henderson was delighted to have another woman nearby, and her husband James helped Rylan with the autumn roundup. For the first time, Rylan found himself part of a community rather than a solitary figure on its edges. Winter came again, the anniversary of their meeting approaching with the first heavy snows. Rylan often marveled at how completely his life had transformed in a single year. The cabin, once a place of mere survival, had become a true home. Olivia's touch was everywhere, curtains at the windows, braided rugs on the floors, the scent of fresh bread, and the sound of her humming as she worked. One December evening, as they sat before the fire, Olivia set aside her mending with unusual solemnity. I have something to tell you, she said, her voice both nervous and joyful. Rylan looked up from the bridle he was repairing. "What is it?" She took his hand and placed it against her still, flat stomach. "By next summer, there will be 3 of us." Joy surged through him, so intense it nearly took his breath. He gathered her in his arms, laughing and kissing her face, her hair, her hands. "A baby," he whispered in wonder. "Our baby." Olivia's eyes shimmered with happy tears. "Our family," she corrected. "The one we're building together." As the snow fell softly outside, insulating them in their warm cocoon of love, Rylan held his wife close and marveled at life's unexpected turns. From the horror of war to the solitude of his early ranching days to this moment of perfect contentment, it had been a long journey. "Do you ever wonder," Olivia murmured against his chest, "what would have happened if you hadn't gone hunting that day? If you hadn't found shelter in that particular barn?" Rylan considered this. "I think we would have found each other somehow," he said finally. "Some things are just meant to be." She smiled up at him. The cowboy and the schoolmistress? "The man who was alone and the woman who taught him he didn't have to be," he corrected gently. Outside, the Montana winter worked its annual transformation, covering the land in pristine white. Inside, the fire crackled and 2 hearts beat as one, warmed by a love born in the most unlikely of circumstances. Spring came early that year, as if nature itself was eager to welcome their child. The creek ran high with snowmelt, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and new calves wobbled alongside their mothers in the expanding herd. Olivia's body changed with the season, her belly growing round with their child. She continued to work alongside Rylan as much as possible, adapting her tasks as her pregnancy progressed. On warm afternoons, he would often find her in the rocking chair he'd built, reading aloud from one of her books, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. "The baby likes Emerson," she informed him with a smile. "Kicks every time I read Self-Reliance." "Already a philosopher," Rylan replied, kneeling beside her to place his hand beside hers. The flutter of movement beneath his palm never failed to amaze him. In June, nearly a year to the day after their wedding, their daughter entered the world during a gentle summer rain. They named her Rebecca Margaret Blackwood, Rebecca after Rylan's mother, Margaret after Olivia's. Frederick made the journey from Helena as soon as he received word, bearing gifts and beaming with pride at his great niece. "She has your eyes, Rylan," he observed, "and Olivia's determined chin." "God help us all," Rylan joked, earning a mock glare from his wife. As Rebecca grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Rylan hired 2 hands to help with the expanded herd, building a bunkhouse for them near the main barn. Olivia started a small school for the children of neighboring ranches, converting the original sitting room into a classroom 3 days a week. Their life settled into a rhythm of hard work and simple pleasures. Sunday picnics by the creek. Evening reading sessions with Rebecca on Rylan's lap. Occasional trips to Helena to visit Frederick and attend social gatherings that no longer felt as foreign to Rylan as they once had. When Rebecca was 3, the winter brought another severe storm, reminiscent of the one that had first brought Rylan and Olivia together. As the family gathered around the fire, Rebecca asked for a story. "Tell me how you and Mama met," she requested, her green eyes so like her father's wide with anticipation though she'd heard the tale many times. Rylan settled her more comfortably on his knee. "Well, it was a night much like this one. Cold enough to freeze the whiskers off a bear." "Rylan," Olivia laughed. "Mind your language." He winked at his wife before continuing. "I was coming back from hunting when the storm hit. I found shelter in an old barn, and there, shivering in the cold, was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen." "Mama," Rebecca supplied happily. "That's right. She was lost and cold, so I wrapped her in my coat and brought her inside the barn." "And did you fall in love right away?" Rebecca asked. Rylan and Olivia exchanged a look filled with shared memories and private joy. Not right away, Olivia answered. But sometimes the best love stories take time to unfold. Like a book, Rebecca nodded sagely. Exactly like a book, Rylan agreed, with new chapters being written every day. Later, after Rebecca was tucked into bed, Rylan and Olivia stood on the porch, watching the snow fall. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, drawing her close against the cold. Happy? He asked, a question he still posed occasionally, as if amazed by his good fortune. Olivia turned in his embrace, raising her face to his. More than I ever imagined possible. And you? Complete, he replied simply, lowering his lips to hers. The years flowed by, marked by the seasons and the milestones of their growing family. A son, Frederick James, joined them 2 years after Rebecca. The ranch expanded, as did their connections to the surrounding community. Rylan served a term as county sheriff before deciding he preferred ranching to politics. Olivia's small school grew to include a proper building, funded by a combination of local families and Frederick's connections in Helena. Rebecca, inheriting her mother's love of learning and her father's affinity for the land, eventually went east to attend college, a journey that caused Rylan no small amount of anxiety, but which Olivia supported wholeheartedly. She'll come back, Olivia assured him as they watched the stagecoach depart. This is her home. And she did return for years later with a degree in botany and plans to improve the region's agricultural practices. Frederick James, more interested in ranching than academics, took over more of the daily management of their now substantial herd, allowing Rylan to focus on breeding stock and Olivia to devote more time to her school. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire community gathered to celebrate at the ranch. Tables laden with food stretched across the yard, lanterns hung from trees, and a small band played as couples danced on a wooden platform built for the occasion. Frederick, now in his 70s, but still spry, raised a toast to the couple. To Rylan and Olivia, who remind us all that the greatest adventures often begin in the most unexpected circumstances. May your next 25 years be as blessed as these have been. As the evening waned and guests began to depart, Rylan led Olivia away from the celebration to the old oak tree that marked the boundary of their original property. Beneath its spreading branches, he presented her with a small wooden box, an elegant version of the one he'd given her during their courtship. Inside lay a gold locket, engraved with their initials and the date they had first met. It's beautiful, Olivia whispered as he fastened it around her neck. Open it, he urged. Within were 2 miniature portraits, one of Rebecca and Frederick James's children, the other a sketch of the original cabin as it had looked when Olivia first came to it as a bride. Our beginnings, Rylan explained, his voice rough with emotion. And what they grew into. Olivia touched the locket reverently, then reached up to caress his face, still handsome, though now lined with age and decades of outdoor living. When you found me by that barn, I thought I'd reached the end of my story. Instead, it was only the beginning. Rylan pulled her close, marveling as he often did at how perfectly she fit against him, even after all these years. I went hunting for deer and found my heart instead, he murmured against her hair, now streaked with silver, but still carrying a hint of lavender. They stood together beneath the oak, surrounded by the life they had built from that chance encounter in a snowstorm. Beyond them, the ranch spread out in all directions, fields and pastures, barns and outbuildings, the expanded house that had sheltered their family through joys and sorrows alike. Do you remember what you said to me that first night in the barn? Olivia asked. When I asked why you were helping me? Rylan smiled at the memory. Out here, we help when we can. Winter's no time for anyone to be alone. She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You saved more than my life that night, Rylan Blackwood. You showed me what love truly means, not grand gestures or pretty words, but being present, sharing the burden, facing the storm together. And we've weathered quite a few, he acknowledged, thinking of the drought years, the harsh winters, the illnesses and setbacks that were inevitable in a life lived fully. With more to come, I'm sure, Olivia replied pragmatically. But I wouldn't trade our life for any other. As the stars emerged in the clear Montana sky, they walked hand in hand back toward the house, not the newlyweds they once were, but partners in the truest sense, their love deepened by shared history and mutual respect. The celebration of their anniversary continued in private, with tender words and touches that spoke of a passion transformed but undiminished by time. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Olivia rested her head on Rylan's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Tell me again," she murmured sleepily, "about the night you found me." It was a request she made occasionally, especially on significant dates or during winter storms that recalled their beginning. Rylan stroked her hair, his voice low and intimate in the darkness. "I was coming back from hunting when the snow started falling harder than I'd ever seen. Could barely see my hand in front of my face. I knew I'd never make it home, so when I spotted that old barn, it seemed like Providence." As he recounted the familiar tale, embellishing certain details as he always did to make her laugh, Rylan reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun that night. From solitude to family, from mere existence to a life rich with purpose and love, all because a storm had driven him to seek shelter in an abandoned barn where a brave woman fought to survive. Some might call it chance or coincidence. Rylan knew better. It was destiny, written in snow and sealed with a coat wrapped around shivering shoulders. The beginning of a love story that would endure through all seasons, weathering every storm that life could bring, growing stronger with each passing year. And as Olivia drifted to sleep in his arms, Rylan whispered a prayer of gratitude for the storm that had changed his life, for the woman who had taught him to love, and for the family they had created together, a legacy of love that would outlast them both. Outside, snow began to fall, gentle and silent, covering the ranch in a blanket of white. Inside, wrapped in each other's warmth, Rylan and Olivia slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they had found in each other not just shelter from the storm, but a home for their hearts that would stand forever.